It was a warm afternoon when the young delivery boy adjusted his helmet and started his shift. His old motorcycle coughed to life as he kicked it twice before it finally started. He worked long hours every day delivering food across the city. Sometimes he didn't even have time to eat properly. But he didn't mind much. He was used to it now. Life had never really been easy for him, but he had learned to keep moving no matter what. He was in his early 20s, tall and lean, with a calm face that rarely showed emotion. The city was crowded, noisy, and full of rush. Every order felt like just another address, just another customer waiting for food. He'd grown used to the sound of his phone buzzing with new orders, and the automated voice telling him where to go next. That afternoon, as he checked his phone, a new order popped up. The address was in a quieter, older neighborhood, far from the main city streets where he usually worked. For some reason, the name of the street caught his eye. It looked oddly familiar, though he couldn't remember why. He frowned for a second, shrugged, and accepted the order. Work was work. He began riding toward the address, weaving through traffic. The noise of the city started fading as he entered the older part of town. The buildings were smaller here, many painted in soft colors that had faded with time. There were big trees on both sides of the road, their branches forming a green tunnel over the narrow street. As he rode deeper into the area, a strange feeling started to grow in his chest. Something about the place stirred memories he couldn't quite reach. The smell of the air, the sound of children laughing somewhere nearby, it all felt like something from long ago. He slowed down the bike and looked around. There was an old corner shop that sold cold drinks and snacks. A man sat outside waving a hand fan lazily. Even that simple sight felt familiar. He shook his head lightly and told himself not to overthink. Maybe it was just another neighborhood that looked like somewhere he had been before. But when he turned the last corner, he saw it, the pale blue gate at the end of the street. He froze. His heart gave a strange jolt. The color, the design, even the little dent on the side of the gate, it was all the same. For a few seconds, he just stared at it, his throat tightening. Could it be? No, it couldn't. It had been more than 10 years. He slowly rolled his bike forward and stopped in front of the gate. The number on the wall matched the one on his delivery app. He looked around carefully. The street was quiet, lined with old trees. There was a broken lamp post beside the gate, leaning slightly to one side. His fingers gripped the handlebar tighter. He remembered that lamp post. He had fallen from his small bicycle right under it once, scraping his knee badly. His father had carried him home in his arms that day, scolding him and laughing at the same time. For a moment, the memory hit him so sharply that it felt real. He blinked fast, trying to clear his head. It couldn't be the same house. There were thousands of houses in the city. It was just coincidence. He turned off the engine and got off the bike. His legs felt a little weak as he reached for the food bag. He looked up again at the gate. The paint had faded, but the pattern of the metal bars was still the same. The small brass nameplate was gone, but he remembered exactly where it used to be. He took a deep breath and pressed the doorbell. A few seconds later, footsteps approached from inside. The gate opened and an elderly woman stood there. She had kind eyes and a soft face. She smiled warmly as she looked at him. "Yes?" she asked gently. "Food delivery," he said, holding out the bag. His voice came out slightly shaky. She nodded and took the bag with both hands. "Thank you, dear. Please wait, I'll bring the cash." As she turned, he got a quick look inside. The hallway behind her looked almost identical to how he remembered it. The same patterned tiles on the floor, though a bit worn now. On the left wall there was a brass clock. He felt his heart stop for a second. It was the same kind of clock his father had owned. The one that used to tick loudly through the quiet nights when he couldn't sleep. The woman came back with some money. "Here you go," she said with a smile. He took it, but before he could stop himself, the words slipped out. "Ma'am, how long have you lived here?" She looked slightly surprised. "Oh, about 15 years, maybe more," she replied. "We bought it from another family. They moved out after something very sad happened here, poor souls. I don't know much about it, though." He swallowed hard, his heart pounding. Do you happen to know who lived here before?" "I think it was a young couple with a little boy," she said softly. "They seemed lovely, from what the neighbors said. But there was an accident and the father passed away. They moved soon after." Her words hit him like a wave. For a few seconds, he couldn't speak. He stared at the floor, trying to hide the storm in his eyes. His chest felt heavy, his heart beating faster with each passing second. The woman gave him a gentle look. "Are you all right, dear?" He forced a small smile. "Yes, I'm fine. Thank you." He turned quickly and walked back to his bike. His hands trembled as he put on his helmet. He started the engine and drove away slowly, but his mind stayed behind at that blue gate. All the way back, the memories he had buried deep inside started surfacing. He remembered his father's laughter, his mother's gentle voice the evenings when they sat together on the porch, and he remembered the night when everything changed, the loud crash, the shouting, the flashing lights of an ambulance. He had been just a small boy, crying as neighbors gathered outside the house. After that day, they had moved away to another part of the city. His mother had sold the house, saying it held too many memories. He had never gone back. Until now. That night he lay in his small rented room, staring at the ceiling. The image of the house wouldn't leave his mind. Every detail replayed in his thoughts. The gate, the tiles, the old clock on the wall. It was all too real to ignore. He tried to sleep, but his eyes stayed open. He thought about the old woman who lived there now, about how she said it had been 15 years. It matched perfectly with when his family had left. He realized there was no doubt anymore. That house wasn't just similar, it was his old home. The next morning he got ready for work as usual, but his heart wasn't in it. Every street he passed reminded him of something connected to that old neighborhood. Every sound made him think of his childhood. He wondered if his mother would even remember the house now. She lived in another town with his younger sister. They rarely talked about the past. Later that week, while riding through the city again, his route brought him close to that same area. He slowed down near the turn that led to the blue gate. For a few seconds, he debated whether to go back. His mind told him to focus on work, but his heart whispered otherwise. Finally, he stopped the bike. He couldn't resist. Something inside him needed to see it again. He parked at the end of the street and stood there, watching the house from a distance. The afternoon sun made the pale blue paint glow softly. A gentle breeze moved the branches of the trees above. He felt like he was standing at the edge of a memory, half in the present, half in the past. He remembered his father teaching him how to fix the chain of his small bicycle right beside that gate. He remembered running barefoot in the front yard after the rain. He remembered sitting on the porch waiting for his father to come home from work. Every corner of that house had a story, and all those stories had been locked away for years. He didn't know why fate had brought him there again, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was a reason. Maybe he was supposed to find something. Maybe some part of his past had been waiting quietly for him to return. He stood there for a long time, lost in thought, until his phone buzzed again. Another order. Another address. Life was calling him back to the present. He started his bike and drove away, but he couldn't stop glancing back at the blue gate in the mirror. That night, as he sat in his small room again, he made up his mind. He would go back. Not as a delivery boy this time, but as someone who once called that house home. The next day came with gray clouds and a light breeze that carried the smell of rain. The young delivery boy got up early, though he hadn't slept much. His mind was still full of the house, the blue gate, the quiet street, the old woman's gentle face. No matter how hard he tried to think about work or his long list of deliveries, his thoughts kept circling back to that one address. He made himself a cup of tea in the small kitchen of his rented room and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was silent except for the sound of traffic outside. On the small wooden table beside him, his phone kept buzzing with new orders, but he didn't pick it up right away. He stared at the wall for a long time, wondering why the sight of that house had affected him so deeply. It wasn't just nostalgia. It was something stronger, something that had stirred parts of him he thought were gone. By noon, he finally decided he would go back to that street again. Not to deliver anything this time, just to see it properly, to face it. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he knew he couldn't stay away. He finished his usual morning deliveries quickly, his mind somewhere else. As the day moved toward evening, he rode through the familiar roads that led to the old part of the city. The air felt heavier now, as if it was carrying the weight of his memories. When he reached the street, everything looked the same as before. Children were playing with a ball near the corner, and the same man sat outside the small shop, fanning himself lazily. But this time the boy parked his bike and walked the rest of the way on foot. Each step toward that blue gate made his chest tighten a little more. He stopped right in front of it, staring quietly. The old paint had peeled off in some places. There were little marks near the lock, maybe from years of use. He took a slow breath and pressed the bell again. After a few seconds, the same elderly woman came out. Her face brightened slightly when she saw him. "Oh, it's you again," she said kindly. "Did I forget something from yesterday's order?" He shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am, He hesitated, not sure how to explain why he was there. "I wanted to talk to you. If that's okay." She looked at him with a curious smile. "Of course, dear. Come in." She opened the gate and he stepped inside slowly. The moment he crossed it, the familiar sound of the metal hinges brought back a wave of memories. His eyes moved around the small front yard. The old mango tree was still there, though it looked much bigger now. He had planted it with his father when he was a child. The woman noticed him looking around. "You've been here before, haven't you?" she asked gently. He nodded, his voice quiet. "Yes, I used to live here when I was little." "With my parents," her eyes softened. "I thought so," she said. "Yesterday, when you asked me how long I'd lived here, I felt there was something behind your question." He smiled faintly, still looking around. "It feels strange to be here again. Everything looks smaller than I remember." She led him toward the veranda and offered him a chair. "Would you like some tea?" He nodded gratefully. She went inside, and while she was gone, he looked around the yard again. The stone path leading to the back door was cracked now, but he could still see the faint outlines of chalk drawings he had once made on the ground. When the woman returned with 2 cups of tea, he thanked her and took one. The steam rose gently between them as they sat in the quiet evening air. "So," she said softly, "you lived here a long time ago?" He nodded. "Yes, my father bought this house when I was a kid. We were happy here." His voice grew heavy. "But one night there was an accident. My father died. We left soon after." The woman's face filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, dear. I didn't know. I only heard something bad had happened to the family before us." He stared into his cup. "I was just a child. I don't remember everything clearly, but I remember this place. Every corner of it." She smiled kindly. "It's strange how houses keep memories. Sometimes I can almost feel the stories of people who lived here before me." He looked up, thoughtful. "Do you ever feel like the house remembers too?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, sometimes. There's a warmth in certain rooms, a feeling like someone still cares about this place." They sat quietly for a few minutes, listening to the distant sounds of the street. Then she said, "Would you like to see inside again? Maybe it would bring you some peace." He hesitated but nodded. "Yes, please." She stood up and guided him through the front door. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of old wood and tea. His eyes moved across the hallway, taking in every detail. The patterned tiles on the floor were the same ones his father had laid down himself. The walls had been repainted, but the shape of the rooms hadn't changed. He walked slowly, almost afraid to touch anything. He could still picture his mother standing in the kitchen, calling him for dinner. He could still hear his father's voice in the living room, telling stories late at night. When they reached the small room at the end of the hall, he stopped. "This was my room," he said quietly. The woman smiled softly. "It's my grandson's room now. He only visits during the holidays." He stepped closer to the window and touched the sill. There, carved faintly into the wood, were the initials of his name, tiny, uneven letters made by a child's hand. His throat tightened. "I did that," he whispered. The woman smiled again. "Then this house really has kept your memories safe." She walked to the corner of the room and pointed at a small wooden chest. "When we first moved in, my husband found something under the floorboard here. We never opened it. It looked personal. I always thought it might belong to the family before us." His eyes widened. "Under the floorboard?" She nodded and bent down, pulling out the small chest. It was old and dusty but still sturdy. She placed it gently on the table. His hands shook slightly as he looked at it. This might be my father's. Would you like to open it?" she asked. He nodded slowly. The latch clicked softly as he lifted it. Inside, there were a few old photographs, a tiny wooden toy plane, and a folded piece of paper. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the paper. The handwriting on it was familiar, curved and neat. It was his father's. The woman quietly stepped back, giving him space as he read the letter. His eyes moved slowly across the faded words. "My dear son," the letter began, "if you ever find this one day, it means you have come back to where it all began. This house holds our laughter, our dreams, and our love. Never forget that even when life takes you far away, your roots stay here." The boy felt his throat tighten. His father had written this before the accident. The words were full of love and warmth. The last line made his eyes blur with tears. "If you ever feel lost, come home, my son. The house will always know your footsteps." He couldn't breathe for a moment. The room felt filled with his father's presence. All the years of distance, the silence, the pain, it all came rushing back, not as sorrow, but as something softer, like healing. The woman watched quietly, her own eyes glistening. "He must have loved you very much," she said softly. He nodded, still holding the letter close to his chest. "He did, and I never got to say goodbye." The old woman placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Maybe this is his way of saying it now. He looked around the room once more, feeling the warmth of his memories fill the space. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like the little boy who once ran through these rooms laughing and full of dreams. As he left the house later that evening, the sun was setting behind the trees. The light fell softly across the blue gate, turning it golden. He paused for a moment, looking back at the house that had once been his whole world. He realized now that fate had brought him there for a reason, not just to deliver food, but to deliver him back to a part of his life he needed to find again. He smiled quietly, whispered a thank you to the air, and walked toward his bike, carrying the letter carefully in his pocket. That night he couldn't sleep. The letter from his father lay on the small table beside his bed, the edges still slightly crumpled from where he had held it too tightly. Every time he closed his eyes, the words came back to him. "If you ever feel lost, come home, my son." He had read those lines a dozen times since returning from the old house. They felt like a whisper from the past, something alive that had crossed the years to reach him. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel completely alone. Yet along with the comfort, there was also a strange heaviness in his heart, a feeling that something was still unfinished. He wondered if his mother knew about the letter. Maybe his father had written it for both of them, not just for him. Maybe there were things his mother had never told him about that night, about what truly happened. The next morning, the sky was pale and cloudy. He went about his deliveries as usual, but his mind was far away. Every street he passed reminded him of something from his childhood: the smell of wet pavement after rain, the echo of his father's laughter, the warmth of his mother's cooking. He realized how much he had buried over the years. After his father's death, life had changed so suddenly. His mother had sold the house and moved them to a small apartment in another city. She never spoke much about the past, and he had learned to stop asking. He grew up fast, started working early, and did what he could to support the family. But now, standing in the middle of his adult life, it felt as though a part of him had been quietly waiting for this moment, to reconnect, to understand, to forgive. That evening, after finishing his last delivery, he parked his bike near a small park and sat on a bench. The city lights shimmered across puddles from the afternoon rain. He pulled the letter out again, reading it under the dim glow of a street lamp. He could almost hear his father's voice as he read the words aloud. He whispered, "I came home, Baba. I found it." His voice cracked, and he quickly wiped his eyes. People passed by, but he didn't care. For once, he didn't want to hide what he felt. The next day, he decided to visit his mother. She lived in a small town about 2 hours away. He hadn't been there in months because of work. As he packed the letter carefully into an envelope, he felt nervous, like he was carrying a secret that could change everything. The bus ride was long and quiet. The scenery outside changed from tall buildings to open fields and dusty roads. When he reached the small neighborhood where his mother lived, he found her sitting outside their house peeling peas in a bowl. Her face lit up when she saw him. "You didn't tell me you were coming," she said with a smile. He smiled back and sat beside her. "I needed to see you." They talked for a while about normal things, his work, her health, the rising prices of groceries. But all the while the letter burned quietly in his pocket. He wanted to tell her, but he didn't know how to start. Finally, he took a deep breath and said softly, "Ami, do you remember our old house, the one with the blue gate?" Her hands paused for a moment. She didn't look up. "Why are you asking about that?" "I went there," he said quietly. "By accident. I had a delivery there a few days ago." Her hands trembled slightly and she set the bowl aside. "You went there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," he said. There's an old woman living there now. She let me in. The house is still the same, and I found something." He pulled the folded letter from his pocket and handed it to her. She stared at it for a moment before slowly unfolding it. As she read, her eyes began to glisten. When she reached the end, she pressed the paper against her chest and closed her eyes. "I never knew he wrote this," she said, her voice trembling. "He must have hidden it before that night." She sat in silence for a while, lost in thought. The sound of the wind rustled through the trees outside. Then she said softly, "Your father loved that house. He built every corner of it with his hands. After the accident, I couldn't bear to stay. Everything reminded me of him. I thought leaving would help us heal." He listened quietly. He had never seen her speak of the past like this before. She continued, "You were so small. You asked me once if he would come back, and I didn't know how to answer. I tried to forget, but some things don't fade. I used to dream about that blue gate every night." He felt a lump rise in his throat. He wanted me to find it. Maybe that's why I ended up there. It felt like something was calling me. She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Maybe it was meant to happen. Maybe your father wanted you to come home, even just once." They sat together quietly, both holding the letter between them. It was as if the words on the paper had opened a window to the past, letting old grief finally breathe. After a long silence, she smiled faintly. "You know, there's a box of his old things in the cupboard. I never opened it fully. Maybe it's time we did." They brought the small wooden box to the table. Inside were old photographs, his father's watch, and a few papers. Among them was a small photo, their family standing in front of the same blue gate. The boy in the photo was holding his father's hand, smiling. He stared at it for a long time. He remembered that day faintly. His father had bought him an ice cream after the picture was taken. It had melted too fast in the summer heat, and his mother had laughed at the mess he made. His mother looked at him and said softly, "Maybe you should go back again. Properly this time. Not as a delivery boy, but as a son visiting his home." He nodded slowly. "I think I will." The next week he found himself back on that same street again. The afternoon sun was warm, and the air smelled of blooming flowers from a nearby garden. The house looked peaceful, quiet and alive in a way he hadn't noticed before. He parked his bike and stood at the gate, holding a small bunch of flowers in his hand. He pressed the bell again, and the elderly woman came out smiling when she saw him. "Ah, you came back," she said kindly. "I thought I might see you again," he smiled. "I wanted to bring some flowers. For the house." She looked touched. "That's very sweet of you. Please come in." He stepped inside once more. This time the memories didn't hurt as much. They felt softer, like gentle echoes rather than sharp reminders. He placed the flowers on the small shelf near the hallway, the same spot where his mother used to keep a vase. The woman noticed the emotion in his eyes. "Do you want to see the backyard?" she asked. "It's beautiful this time of year." He nodded. They walked through the kitchen and into the small open yard behind the house. The old swing was gone, but the stone bench under the mango tree was still there. The same tree he had planted with his father. He touched its rough bark gently. "It's grown so big," he whispered. "Yes," the woman said softly. "It gives the sweetest fruit now. My grandchildren love it." He smiled faintly. "My father used to say the same thing, that it would grow tall and strong just like me." They stood there quietly for a moment. Then he turned to her and said, "Thank you for letting me come back. I didn't realize how much I needed this." She smiled warmly. "Houses have souls, dear, and this one waited patiently for you." As he walked back through the house one last time, he looked at everything with new eyes. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. He knew now that the pain of losing his father would never fully go away, but it didn't have to control him anymore. When he stepped out of the gate, the woman said, "You're welcome to visit any time. This house will always be open for you." He nodded, his heart full. "Thank you. I'll come again." As he rode away, the sun dipped low, turning the sky golden. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw the blue gate growing smaller behind him. But this time he didn't feel the weight of loss. He felt peace. He whispered to himself, "I came home. Baba, I really did." The wind carried his words away, gentle and warm, as the street disappeared behind him. Days passed after he last visited the house, but the feeling it left in his heart stayed with him. Something inside him had changed. It was as if a missing piece of his life had quietly fallen back into place. Work felt lighter now. He still woke up early, still made deliveries all across the city, but his mind wasn't as restless anymore. He no longer felt like he was just moving through life. Every sound of the road, every familiar street corner reminded him that he was part of something bigger, something that stretched from the past into the present. Yet, even with that calm, a quiet thought stayed in the back of his mind. The letter from his father had answered some of his questions, but not all. There were still things he didn't understand. Why his father wrote it. What he truly meant by, "If you ever feel lost, come home." He began to wonder if his father had known something he had never told his family. One quiet evening, after finishing his shift, he sat by the window of his small room. The city outside was alive with lights and noise, but he felt distant from it. On the small table lay the letter folded neatly, beside the small photo of his family he had taken from his mother's box. He looked at his father's face in the picture. The man had kind eyes full of life and quiet strength. He thought about how hard his father had worked to build that house, how proud he had been of it. He had built it brick by brick, saving money for years to give his family a home they could call their own. And then suddenly, it was all gone. The boy leaned back and sighed. Maybe the house wasn't just a building. Maybe it was a message. Something his father had left behind to remind him of who he was and where he came from. That thought stayed with him for days. One afternoon, while making a delivery near the same neighborhood again, he decided to stop by the house once more. It wasn't planned, but somehow his route led him there. When he turned onto the familiar street, the air felt calm, almost peaceful. The blue gate stood just as before, glowing softly in the sunlight. He parked his bike and walked up to it, feeling that same warmth in his chest. He pressed the bell, and after a short while, the elderly woman came to the gate with her familiar gentle smile. "Back again, dear," she said kindly. He smiled. "Yes, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. Come in." As he stepped through the gate, she added, "I was hoping you'd visit. I found something the other day while cleaning the storeroom. I thought it might belong to your family." She led him to the living room and handed him a small metal box covered in dust. "It was tucked behind one of the old shelves," she said. "It looked old, and I remembered your story." He took the box carefully. It was heavy, the metal cool against his palms. "Thank you," he said softly. "Can I open it here?" "Of course," she said with a smile. He placed the box on the table and gently lifted the lid. Inside was a stack of old documents, a faded notebook, and a small bundle of photos tied together with a piece of string. He untied the string and began flipping through the photographs. Most were familiar. Pictures of his parents smiling in front of the house, him as a toddler playing near the mango tree, birthdays and festivals. But at the bottom of the pile, he found something different. A photograph of his father standing beside another man he didn't recognize, holding what looked like a construction plan for the house. Curious, he pulled out the folded notebook beneath it. It was filled with sketches, notes, and a few personal thoughts written in his father's handwriting. As he flipped through the pages, one entry caught his attention. It was dated just a few days before the accident. It read, "If something happens to me, I hope my family never forgets that this house was built with love, not for shelter, but for memory. Every corner carries a story. I've hidden a few of them where only my son would one day find them, not to burden him, but to remind him who we were. Home is not just a place. It's a promise that even when we are gone, love stays behind to guide those who remain." The boy's heart started pounding. He ran his fingers over the words again and again. His father had written it for him, for this moment, perhaps even knowing that one day, by some twist of fate, he would return. He closed the notebook and sat silently for a while. The woman watched him kindly, her eyes full of understanding. "He must have been a thoughtful man," she said quietly. He nodded. "He was, and I think he wanted me to find this, to remember." "Sometimes," she said softly, "the people we lose don't really leave. They find ways to reach us through small signs, through moments that feel too perfect to be coincidence." Her words stayed with him. Later that evening, after thanking her once again, he stepped outside. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The light fell on the house, making it glow softly as if the past itself was shining through the walls. He sat on the small bench outside the gate, the notebook still in his hands. He read the last page once more. No home is ever lost, and it only waits to be found again. Tears filled his eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness. They were from understanding. He finally realized what his father's words truly meant. The house wasn't just a part of his childhood. It was a symbol and of love, of family, of how even after loss, life has a way of bringing you back to where your heart belongs. The letter, the house, the old woman, everything had connected like pieces of a puzzle. Fate had gently guided him through all of it. As he sat there in silence, he remembered all the times he had felt lost, working long hours, struggling to make ends meet, wondering if his life had any real direction. He had always thought he was just surviving, but now he understood that he had never truly been lost. He had only been on his way back home. The next morning, he called his mother. "Ami," he said softly, "I found more of Baba's things. His notebook." Her voice grew quiet on the other end. "Did you?" "Yes, he left messages in it. For us, I think. He wanted us to remember." She took a long breath. "He always believed that love never ends, that even after someone leaves, it stays in the places they touched." He smiled faintly. "He was right. Bring it when you visit," she said gently. "We'll keep it safe." "I will," he promised. After hanging up, he looked at the blue gate one more time. He walked up to it and placed his hand against the cool metal. For a moment, he closed his eyes and imagined his father's hand there too. Long ago, the day they first moved in. In that quiet moment, he felt a peace he hadn't felt in years. The noise of the world faded, replaced by the faint sound of birds and the soft rustle of leaves from the mango tree. He realized then that his father's last gift wasn't just a house or a letter. It was a path, one that led him back to himself. He whispered softly, "Thank you, Baba, for everything." As he turned to leave, the wind picked up gently, brushing past his shoulders like an unseen touch. He smiled through his tears, knowing deep inside that his father had heard him. That evening, as he rode back through the streets, everything looked different. The city that had once felt crowded and cold now seemed alive, full of meaning. Every person he passed, every house he saw felt connected somehow, like small stories within one larger story that life was still writing. He had come searching for answers, but found something much more. He had found belonging. The letter had brought him back to his childhood home, but the journey had brought him back to his heart. A few weeks had passed since he found his father's notebook. Life had slowly gone back to its usual rhythm, but something inside him had changed forever. He still woke up early, tied his delivery bag, and went out into the city like before. Yet now, every sound, every road, every small act of kindness around him seemed to mean more. He no longer rode through the streets as a man lost in routine. He moved like someone who finally knew where he belonged. There was calmness in him that others began to notice. His friends at work often joked that he seemed lighter, happier, even when he had long days. He would just smile and say, "Maybe I finally found my way back home." But what he didn't tell them was how deeply the experience had shaped him. The house, the letter, and the notebook had awakened something in his heart, a quiet understanding that sometimes the things we lose aren't really gone. They wait for the right time to return. One evening, as he sat on his bed after work, he opened the notebook again. The pages had started to feel familiar, like the voice of someone who had never really left. He turned to the last page where his father's words were written, "No home is ever lost. It only waits to be found again." He smiled. The sentence felt heavier with meaning now. He thought about how his own journey had mirrored those words, how fate had brought him back to that very place, not by plan, but by quiet design. The next morning, he decided to take a small break from work. He called his manager and said he needed 2 days off. His manager, who had always seen him as dependable, agreed without question. He packed a small bag and took a bus to his hometown. The journey was long, the roads winding through familiar places that stirred old memories. As the bus moved past fields, hills, and small villages, he looked out the window and thought about his childhood. The laughter, the simple joys, the family dinners. The nights when his father would tell him stories about working hard and being kind. When he reached his village, the first thing he noticed was how peaceful it still was. The same trees stood by the roadside, the same small shops, and the same distant sound of children playing in the fields. He walked to his mother's house, the one they had moved into after losing the old home. She was sitting outside cutting vegetables, her silver hair glowing softly in the sunlight. The moment she saw him, her face lit up with surprise. "You didn't tell me you were coming," she said, smiling wide. He laughed. "I wanted to surprise you." She hugged him tightly, and for a long moment neither of them said anything. When she finally let go, she looked at his face closely. "You look peaceful," she said softly. "Something's different about you," he nodded. "I went back, Ami, to the old house." Her hands paused mid-motion. "You did?" "Yes," he said, sitting beside her. "I made a delivery there one day. I didn't even realize it at first. But when I saw the blue gate, it all came back." She looked down, tears filling her eyes. "That house." "I never had the courage to go back." "I know," he said gently. "But maybe it was time. Maybe Baba wanted us to." She listened quietly as he told her everything. About the letter, the kind woman who lived there, the metal box, and the notebook full of their father's handwriting. He showed her the notebook, turning the pages slowly. Her fingers trembled as she touched the familiar handwriting. When she read the message he had left about how love never leaves a home, her tears fell silently. "He always believed that," she whispered. "He used to say that even when walls fall, love still lives in the ground beneath them." They sat together for a long time, talking about the old days, and about laughter, about struggles, and about how much they had endured. Later that evening, they lit a small candle near the window. It was something his father used to do whenever he prayed. The soft light filled the room with warmth. His mother said quietly, "Maybe you were meant to find that house. Maybe he guided you there." He nodded, looking out at the stars. "I think so too." The next morning, he visited his father's resting place. The air was cool, the sky clear. He brought along the notebook wrapped in a clean cloth. Kneeling beside the grave, he placed the notebook gently on the ground. "I found it, Baba," he said softly. "Your words. They found me when I needed them most." He stayed there for a long while, talking quietly, not out loud, but in his heart. He told him about the people he met, the struggles he faced, and how he now understood what home really meant. Before leaving, he whispered, "I promise I'll keep your words alive. I'll make sure others know that love doesn't end with walls or time." When he returned to the city, he carried a new sense of purpose. He didn't just want to deliver packages anymore. He wanted to do something that would make people feel the same warmth he had rediscovered. So he started a small online page where he shared short stories about kindness, about life's unexpected turns, and about how ordinary moments can carry deep meaning. He never mentioned his own name or story directly. He just wrote from the heart, hoping his words might reach someone who needed them, the way his father's words had reached him. Slowly, people began to follow his page. Comments started pouring in, messages from strangers saying his stories gave them hope, that they made them remember their loved ones, that they reminded them to believe in small miracles. Every time he read one of those messages, he felt his father smiling somewhere in the quiet corners of his heart. Months passed, and one evening, as he scrolled through the messages, he saw one that stood out. It was from a young man who wrote, "Your story about finding home helped me reconcile with my family after years. Thank you for reminding me that it's never too late to go back." He stared at the message for a long time, then smiled. That was when he realized the full circle of it all. His father's words had lived on, through him, and now through others. The boy who once delivered packages had unknowingly begun delivering something far more valuable: hope. One weekend, he visited the old house again. The elderly woman was sitting in the garden, watering her plants. When she saw him, she waved warmly. "Back again," she said with a laugh. "Yes," he said, smiling. "I just wanted to say thank you. For everything." She nodded kindly. "I'm just glad you found what you were looking for." He looked around the garden, the blue gate, the mango tree. Everything looked peaceful. "This house will always be special," he said softly. "It should be," she replied. "It carries your story now," he smiled. "And maybe it always did." They talked for a while, sharing tea and quiet laughter. When he finally stood up to leave, the evening light fell gently over the house, wrapping it in a golden glow. He took one last look before walking away, not with sadness but with gratitude. As he rode home through the fading sunset, he thought about how strange life could be. One small delivery, one knock on a door had led him to rediscover his entire past. And maybe that was what life really was. A long road full of small, quiet miracles waiting behind doors we least expect. That night, he wrote a final post on his page. Sometimes life takes us far away, only to lead us back to the place where love first began. And when it does, don't be afraid to knock, because behind that door you might just find yourself again. He closed his phone, looked out his window, and smiled at the night sky. Somewhere out there under those stars, he knew his father was proud. He had come full circle. The boy who once lost his home had found it again, not just in walls and bricks, but in the quiet corners of his heart. And in that simple truth, he found peace. Months had gone by since the last time he visited the old house. Life had become steady, peaceful, not perfect but calm in a way he had never known before. His deliveries continued. His small writing page grew slowly, and every now and then he would receive messages from people saying how his words had touched them. He didn't see himself as a writer. He was still just a delivery boy, a man who carried things from one door to another. But deep down he had begun to understand something beautiful. Sometimes the smallest moments, like a simple knock, can carry the weight of a lifetime. Every once in a while, when his route took him near the same neighborhood, he would pass by that familiar blue gate. He didn't always stop. Sometimes he would just slow down, look at it, and smile to himself. The house didn't make him sad anymore. It made him feel whole. It was a reminder that love doesn't vanish, it only changes shape. One late afternoon, as the sun was setting low behind the buildings, his phone buzzed with a new delivery address. He opened the app, glanced at the details, and froze for a moment. The street name was familiar, very familiar. He zoomed in on the map and felt a small shiver run through him. The address was right next to his old house. He couldn't help but smile. "All right, Bubba," he whispered softly. "One more visit." He rode through the golden streets, the wind warm against his face. The city was quieter than usual, as if holding its breath for something unseen. When he reached the street, he saw the blue gate just as before, but his delivery was for the house next to it, the one where a new family had recently moved in. He parked his bike, took out the package, and walked to the door. A young woman opened it with a kind smile. "Delivery?" she asked. "Yes," he said, handing it over. "Please check it before I mark it delivered." As she opened the parcel, her little daughter ran out, laughing, chasing a small red ball that rolled out onto the street. The ball hit the blue gate next door and stopped. The little girl ran after it, but the road was uneven and she tripped slightly. Without thinking, he rushed forward and caught her before she could fall. "Careful," he said gently. "Got it?" The little girl giggled, holding onto her ball. "Thank you." Her mother hurried over, relieved. "Oh my, thank you so much." "She's always running around," he smiled. "Kids are meant to run. That's how they grow." The woman laughed softly and nodded. "You sound like my father," she said. "He always says the same thing." He just smiled again. But as he turned back toward his bike, he noticed something small. The mango tree in front of his old house had grown taller. Its branches now reached over the wall, heavy with fruit. The sight made him pause. It was strange how something could keep growing, year after year, even when everything else had changed. He stood there for a moment, watching the sunlight dance through the leaves, and suddenly he heard the blue gate open. The elderly woman stepped out, holding a small bowl of mangoes. When she saw him, her face lit up with joy. "Oh, look who it is," she said warmly. "I was just thinking about you." He smiled, surprised. "Really?" "Yes," she said, laughing. "Every time the tree gives fruit, I think, I should save some for that kind boy who once came here with a story in his eyes." She handed him the bowl. "Take these. They're sweet this year." He accepted them gratefully. "Thank you. They used to be my favorite when I was little." "I know," she said softly. "You told me once." They sat for a few minutes near the gate, talking as the sky turned a soft shade of orange. The old woman told him that the house had been good to her, peaceful, full of kind memories. She said that sometimes she could almost feel the warmth of the family who had once lived there. He listened quietly, smiling. "I'm glad," he said. "That's how it's supposed to be." After a while, she looked at him thoughtfully. "You know," she said, "that day you came here, it changed something for me too. I had just lost my husband then. I was lonely. But when you told me about your father, about this house, it reminded me that love never really leaves. It just shifts places." He felt his throat tighten a little. "Maybe we were both meant to remind each other," he said softly. She nodded, her eyes warm. "Yes, maybe that's what fate does. It brings people together at just the right moment." Before leaving, he looked back at the house one last time. The evening light made it glow gently, almost like it was alive. For the first time, he noticed how peaceful it looked. Not haunted by memories anymore, but filled with quiet love. As he got on his bike, the little girl from next door waved at him with her red ball in hand. "Bye, Uncle," she shouted. He waved back, smiling wide. "Bye, little one. Be careful with that ball." She giggled and ran back inside. He started his bike and slowly drove away, the wind brushing against his face. But this time, as he looked at the road ahead, he felt something deep inside. Not sadness, not nostalgia, but a calm certainty that he had truly closed a circle in his life. The house was no longer a chapter of pain. It was a story of return, forgiveness, and quiet love. That night, after finishing all his deliveries, he went home and placed the bowl of mangoes on the table. Their sweet scent filled the small room. He sat down, took out his notebook, not his father's but his own, and began to write again. He wrote about the little girl and the red ball, about the old woman who waited with a smile, about how life always finds a way to bring the right people together. And when he finished, he wrote a final line, one that came straight from his heart. "One day, you'll knock on a door without knowing what waits behind it, and life will quietly whisper, 'Welcome home.'" He closed the notebook and looked around his room. It was small, simple, but filled with warmth. There were photos of his mother, a few old memories, and a small framed picture of his father by the window. He whispered softly, "I kept my promise, Baba." I didn't let the story end. Outside, the night was calm. The city's noise faded into a distant hum. Somewhere far away, maybe just beyond the stars, he liked to believe his father was smiling, proud, peaceful, and close. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and listened to the sounds of the night, a distant dog barking, a bicycle bell ringing, the wind brushing gently against the window. And for the first time in his life, he realized something simple yet profound. Home isn't a single place. It's made of moments, people, and memories that never leave, even when everything else does. It's in the kindness of strangers. It's in the letters we never expect to find. It's in the doors we knock on, and the hearts that open when we least expect it. He smiled to himself, a single tear sliding down his cheek, not of sadness but gratitude. The boy who once delivered other people's stories had now lived one worth remembering. And maybe that was what his father wanted all along.